what he thinks and what he's up to, the more you can start to begin to understand what he's trying to do in his work. And I got to this portrait, which is the most famous one of 1500. And I mean, it's an extraordinarily powerful thing, and as we saw, it's sort of sacrilegious, because clearly he is showing himself to be like Jesus Christ. And I think I did make comparisons like that, I hope, to Byzantine examples. Even with the kiss card, I mean, he doesn't usually have that little thingy there. Looks like Bill Haley. I think you're a bit too young to remember, but he came before Elvis. Rock Around the Clock. Did you all sing Rock Around the Clock when you were babies? No? Come on. You guys, that's happening. I remember, I don't know, about 9 or 12 or something when I first heard Bill Haley and the Comets playing on the radio, Rock Around the Clock, and it was just, wow, whole new, because until then we just had, that was pop music. Anyway, that's enough of that. So the kiss girl thing, that clearly derives from the Byzantine image of God, the Pantocrator, the creator of all things, the superstar. And so he's connecting himself with that. But as I said, not in a pretentious kind of way. Well, it's a bit pretentious, but just the idea of equating himself with the creator. God makes stuff, so do I, basically. And I talked on a bit about the distinction between making stuff and creating stuff, because it implies the intellectual component. You think about things before you actually make it. And because don't forget, until this time, most artists didn't really have much creative input into their works. They were essentially, I mean, the quality, the craft, all of that goes into it. But essentially they were told what to do by whoever was paying for it. So now you've got a new idea of the artist as innovator in all sorts of different ways. And also I talked about the emphasis on the head, the brain, and the hand. So the thinking and the doing, the act of the contemplative lives, which we would love to make that distinction. We'll see a little bit more of that today as we go along. So this is a unique thing. I showed you a few self-portraits last time. I don't know if I mentioned, this is the last actual painted self-portrait that he did, 1500. He's still got a long way to go, 28 years to go. But as far as I know, there isn't another one. Not that survived anyway, because apparently there's a document that he actually painted and gave to Raphael when he was in Rome, a self-portrait, as a little, I mean, artists always do that to each other, I guess. So that would have been the one more, but it's gone. So check under your beds when you get home. If you find a hairy guy, maybe we're in luck. So the other artist who is kind of hooking himself up into the divinity within ourselves sort of idea is Leonardo da Vinci. And this is actually a little bit later, about 1517 or so. And an argument whether or not it's actually a self-portrait or a portrait of him. I think it's self, but doesn't really matter if that's what people thought he looked like or should look like. Again, it's this godlike, divine being with the big eyebrows, all that stuff. Did I show you that at the very end?
Yeah.
So that's as I said, that's Dürer becoming Christ. This is Christ becoming Dürer, and then the bling guy. I did show you that at the very end. Quite smart with his suit and everything. Anyway, wait a minute. There were two. That's a new one. I didn't even see that one. Wasn't there before. Oh, spooky. So, did I get to this? Does that look familiar? Okay.
Show the picture.
Did I flash it up? Because this is him in Venice. Remember, he's gone to Venice for the first of the two trips on his honeymoon, but without his wife. So that tells you a little bit something about him, perhaps. But he's gone there, as I said, because he really does believe that the Italians had discovered the secrets of the ancients, the ancient Greek world, idealized beauty, things like that. And he wants to know too. So off he goes as this northern artist. And we saw a few others like Roger, for example, going down to Rome. Bruegel travelled down actually quite a bit after this. But they don't suck up art that much. I think they're more impressed by the scenery, perhaps, than anything else along the way. And Dürer does a little bit of both, as we'll see in a bit. But he's in Venice for not that long, his first trip. This is actually a sort of topographical view of the main square in Venice, St. Mark's Square, which is the big touristy spot nowadays, by a fellow called Gentile. Don't worry about the name. Gentile Bellini, who was the brother of Giovanni Bellini, who's the much more significant, more innovative one, who Dürer learns an awful lot from, but just to locate us in Venice. And it's all about the accuracy of the place. They're very proud of their city. But you see, this is, you're talking about Byzantine influence. This is a straight Byzantine church that just happens to be in Venice, basically. And the Doge's palace right next door, I mean, that's the weirdest mix of Moorish and Gothic and every single style you could possibly imagine. It's the most wonderfully eclectic building. Western artists don't hate to admit the influence of Moorish art or architecture because they are in. So you sort of push that under the carpet a bit. After having just been in the south of Spain and seen if you've ever been down to, no, you've never been anywhere, I mean, Seville and Granada and places like that. I mean, it's just Cordoba. It's quite extraordinary grand buildings that were created down there, and that sort of trickled out north into mainland Europe, if you can call it that. Now, honestly, I've never bothered to figure it out, and I can't find them, so they may not be here. But supposedly these three chappies by Dürer are somewhere in there, but I don't believe that for a minute. Anyway, he's looking and he's learning. What's going on actually is this. There were a lot of kind of gentlemen. They're all sort of dressed as monks in a way, but they're actually just businessmen, and they would create these charitable organizations. They would do good deeds and had wonderful buildings. If you go to Venice, which you probably won't, you'll see the amazing buildings that are still there. Even the Accademia, the art gallery, is one of these old buildings transformed. And this particular order, they owned a fragment of the True Cross, which is being hauled around in procession in this reliquary under the canopy here. But it's all about, the Venetians loved a parade and everything else. So anyway, he's looking, just the fact that he's looking and learning, and it hasn't happened quite yet, but things like, big argument about this, whether it's very late Giorgione or very early Titian, could be both actually. But it's called the Fête Champêtre, the Concert Champêtre, which is a totally wrong title. If you ever took my, I come to my private lectures up at this place called the Women's Art Association, because I get around to Giorgione, Titian later on. I'm doing a series about the High Renaissance. And I will explain all to you, because what people thought was just a country concert. I mean, did it not look a bit odd? You got these fully dressed young gentlemen who were totally ignoring their dates, who forgot to get dressed this morning, all of this kind of silly stuff. But in fact, it's hugely Neoplatonic, which could make it potentially boring, but it isn't. It's all about the two Venuses and the two aspects of love and things like that. On and on and on. But I discovered the great secret of this picture, so again, it'll cost you $10 to find out. Anyway, it hadn't happened quite yet, but this is the sort of ideal of femininity and beauty that the Venetians were creating. Now, what Dürer does, and I find, honestly, I don't know how to explain this. It's some very odd stuff going on here. And what he's doing is he's examining the human figure, both male and female, and strange things happen. I mean, even this one is sort of almost an academic study with a lady with a hand on a big stick. That's sort of all right, proportion-wise. I mean, she could lose a couple of pounds, but couldn't we all of that sort of thing. But then you get things like this. This is totally falling between two stools, because it's kind of an idealized, beautified figure, and she's sort of got the right classical proportions. But classical beauties do not wear slippers, and they don't have little. I mean, she's a sort of German Hausfrau with a little silly smile on it. Well, it's actually rather a nice smile, isn't it? It's just sort of wrong in the way that if you were going to idealize the figure. So it's kind of very personalized. It's also, as you can see, this kind of hatching. We'll see examples in just a bit of Dürer as an engraver. I think this is sort of how engravers draw. Anyway, it's also got nice foxing, which is sort of a fungus that grows on old paper, and you can sort of kill it and wash it off, but I think it's rather good because it makes it look aged somehow. Anyway, she's rather nice, I think almost because of the slippers. But then it gets very, very strange. This is, towards the end of his life, Dürer virtually gave up painting. Some artists do, they just get tired, and Piero Francesco in 15th century Italy was a similar one. But he started writing books about theory, about perfect proportion, things like that. And these are a couple of drawings from this book where, again, if you go back to ancient Greek sculpture, the basic measurement was the thumb. You just kept adding thumbs for the forearm, the upper arm, and the head went into the body 7 times. There was a law about, that's why, our ideal beauty looks beautiful all the time, because it's perfectly proportioned. And it was all related to the musical harmony of the spheres, and it was wonderfully philosophical, the basis of it all. So what the hell is this? I mean, you've got all the numbers and the measurements, and still that looks on, well, see, it's seriously analysed and everything, and yet the end result, you can do a few sit-ups or something just to correct the impressions of it. So again, as I said, I cannot explain that at all. But then when he gets into actual images of sort of idealised human beings, I'm not sure if you could quite call it that. This is 1497. It's an early engraving. And don't worry about these. I just want to kind of rub my point in a little bit. And it's about these 4 witches. And it's sort of like the 3 graces who invited a friend over for a bit. So you get the idea of the beautiful sort of characters. And they've got nice headdresses on, things like that. Not much else. And they are witches because there's skulls and there's bones and there's a little demonic creature jumping out of the cupboard over there. I have no idea. And this is some kind of Masonic symbolic. I'm sure somebody's figured that one out. But it just in the attitude of the standard of beauty, if you like. Again, they're all rather hippie and lumpy, and classical creatures don't look like that. And admittedly, now he's sort of thinking about Italy already, I suppose. Now, see, this is not somehow good, is it? It's called the ladies' or the women's bathhouse, and there's all sorts of scratching and scrubbing and looking at, getting a good look at it. It's just sort of silly, isn't it? It's very hard to take it serious. But look, there's an asperge. We've seen a couple of them. And what I love this character here, just sort of sitting there very comfortably with it, keeping a nice hat on. I'm not naked. But they're all distorted. Again, it's hard to figure out exactly what's going on. This is 1496. It's actually drawing pen and ink, so maybe it's a study for engraving. And a little bit of equal time, not quite as strange as the men's bath, which is actually a woodcut. I'm going to talk about the printmaking stuff in just a bit, but again, there's, I'm sure, lots of significance. He looks like the brother of that one, maybe. And I think that's actually quite rude. You see that little tap thing sticking out there. But again, how you explain away these things, not quite sure. So then you get something like that, which is, again, his sort of the best of his engraving technique in some ways at this early stage. It's, again, 1498. And some of you may know Titian's marvellous Abduction of Europa, which is in Boston. And it's Europa being on the back of the bull, being carried over the sea. But here she's being sort of abducted, and there's people rushing after her over there. And I don't think anybody's quite pinned the story down. But she's not that bothered. I mean, she's just reclining and holding the pose somehow. And always with Dürer, this amazing landscape. Because I think this is sort of what I find is kind of the split personality almost of Dürer. Just to show you one other one to make the point. It's called Nemesis. Nemesis was the goddess of vengeance. And this is 1501-2, something like that, an engraving. And they're quite big, these things, if you think of an engraving plate, about 13 inches high. And again, it should be an image of ideal beauty, but honestly don't think it is somehow. I mean, again, Rembrandt does mythological females who have nice double chins, but it's always because he's using Saskia, his lovely wife, as his model, and she's perfect the way she is. He doesn't want to change her around too much. So I can't quite explain this because that's rather different. Nemesis, as other things, she punishes, so she's got the bridle and everything else. So she's all a little bit lumpy and bumpy, and again, not exactly the ideal of perfection. But then you look down at the bottom, and this is quite absolutely, these are breathtakingly beautiful. She's up on the heavens have sort of unfurled. She's standing rather wobbly on this little globe thingy there. And then you look into the valleys and the hills, and this is just, all of this, and again I'm going to show you some more engravings in just a bit. You have to get your magnifying glass out and look at all of this stuff that's going on here. And you may not, it's sort of like looking into the back of a Van Eyck. You remember the Chancellor Rolla, all those. If you don't like seeing little tiny people in boats and people running across bridges, you're not going to get off on this. But I think it's quite extraordinary. And again, when you think of the process of engraving, it's even more magical somehow. So to me, this is kind of the, Dürer and his evil twin brother somehow, because this is his sort of learned knowledge, you might say, that he's acquired from his study of Italian masters, and that's where he sort of kind of goes a little bit wrong. And this is his inherited knowledge, I guess you could say, his inherited northernness, all of the wonderful landscape, and again we'll see other examples of that in just a little bit. So the two sit rather uneasily with each other somehow. But one thing, we're going to come back to woodcuts and engravings in just a bit, but one of the things I want to really emphasize with Dürer is how incredibly innovative he is. And again, it's one of those things where a little bit of art history helps, because if you don't know what comes before or after, it might not be quite that exciting. But he basically invents the art of watercolour painting. Or again, doesn't invent, sort of like Van Eyck doesn't invent oil painting, but he perfects it, he makes it his own basically. And Dürer does the same thing with watercolour, rather modestly to begin with, because watercolour had been used. I mean, just if you took a woodcut or something, it's a bit boring, just rather thick outlines and solid form. So you just get a brush and wash in a bit of blue for the sky and green for the landscape, basically, and that which you could add in $3 for the price of it, basically. So you made it a little bit more attractive somehow. And Dürer, to begin with, is a bit pedantic, but it's interesting how extraordinarily quickly he learns just sort of what watercolour is, what it can do, basically. So at the beginning, some of the early ones, this is, again, don't worry about the specifics here, just want to get the point across. 1494, and we're in Innsbruck, which is Switzerland, so he's running around a little bit, sort of travelling around, and just very, very, I mean, if I were to do architectural drawings, which I probably won't, this is sort of probably what I would do. I would get my ruler out, I would draw lots of straight lines all over, and then I'd sort of colour them in, being very careful not to go outside the lines, of course. So it's quite tiny, it's sort of Germanic precision, you might say. So that's one of the early ones. And see, the other thing you have to remember is that, a bit like the self-portraits, he must be doing this just because he likes it, because I'm sure nobody would buy something like this, because it's just not important enough, and it's not a medium that sort of... And when you think of it, you have to really wait almost until late 18th century England, when people like Turner and Goethe and all sorts of other... watercolour becomes a sort of specialised medium at that point. People do nothing but watercolours finally. But, that's a long time after Dürer, and there's not anything wonderfully good in between. So it's other ones, it's just called the wire drawing mill, and again, very factual, I guess you could say. Nice little details of the landscape, and again, all of the bits and the pieces going on. Lots of little things to look at. But I think, again, what artists learn, also just a compositional thing, which I'm sure you all get taught, is see how it kind of falls, everything falls out of the picture at the bottom left-hand corner. So, you should put something there to prop it all up, basically. So I think what you can learn is, first of all, what to leave out, because you don't actually have to... This is the great lesson that artists eventually sometimes learn along the way. We certainly nowadays, we don't... Maybe in the 19th century they wanted all the specificity of detail, but now we like to fill in the gaps ourselves somehow. And also, again, compositional stuff. So things like... these are two of the most famous of all of his watercolours. One's called the Pond in the Wood. That one's the Pond in the Wood. And these are about 1495, 96, so only a year or so after these ones. So again, he's really catching on fast what watercolour can do for him and what he can do with it, basically. So you're leaving lots of stuff out. Again, it has an almost impressionistic quality. He's also, see how he's propped up the corner a little bit there. So that's Path in the Wood. These are both in the British Museum, by the way, and that's called The House on an Island. So how artists love reflections, because it kind of, again, helps to balance a composition. Then he puts in this rather nice little boat again, holding up the composition down there. And they are signs, so obviously he sees these things as, maybe as with some of the self-portrait, he comes back later and does it, but still he sees it as kind of a work of art. But it's all part of, he's a bit like a Leonardo, he's studying, he's examining, he's just interested in absolutely everything that you can, that exists around him somehow. And this just blows me away. It's just called The Great Piece of Turf. And it is maybe 1503. It's in the Albertina. I'll come back to the Albertina a bit. It's the great gallery in Vienna. And it has, you could complain that it's just sort of photographic, but again, nobody had even remotely done things like this. If you were going to show flowers, you showed roses and lilies and things that had symbolic reference to Mary's purity. I don't think all these weeds have any symbolism whatsoever. He's just done it because he thinks they're interesting. All these lovely shapes, all the various greens. And again, the meticulous craftsmanship, however you want to describe it, purely for his own personal pleasure. It has to be. And again, because he just wants to look at because this is something that's not going to be the same tomorrow, even when he comes back. So there's that kind of idea almost of transience, but he's not hitting you over the head with symbolic value. Then he'll do something like that, and this wonderful bug. And this is, it's like textbook stuff. It could be out of a textbook on it's a stag beetle with these very dangerous-looking sort of. Well, if you see nature shows, they sort of wrestle each other. It's quite exciting. They try and flip each other over on their backs, grabbing each other with these great claws. And you can see it's obviously a dead bug, and you can see the little the shadows coming. But even here, look, 1505. Remember the logo, the monogram AD that he adopts quite early on. So again, that's just all about accuracy. That's rather good. That's actually, I'm pretty sure this is a drawing. There's going to be an engraving after it later on. You can't even spell rhinoceros, for God's sake. That's a bit silly out there, isn't it? See, they didn't have spell check back then. Anyway, that's again, it's very kind of factual, very scientific in a way of studying this wonderful beast. I can't remember the story behind it. Looks like he's sort of wearing pajamas of some kind, doesn't he? Anyway, so that's pretty good just for sort of realism. And there were a couple of other artists. There's one in particular, a German, who's doing this sort of thing, but I can't remember his name. Let me look at that. See, that's about, there are others, there are birds' wings and all sorts of other, just again, very factual. And this is, you all know that, because that's really famous. It's called the Hare. 1502. If this came up in the exam and you got the date wrong, there'd be trouble, I'll tell you. Because you could a bit of a clue there. And again, it's in the Albertina. It's watercolour and gouache. And gouache, as you know, is kind of opaque watercolour. Give a little bit more body than regular watercolour. About 10 by 11 inches. So it's about the size of one of them, I guess. And it's, again, the trouble is it's one of those images that's become overly popularized, sort of like the Mona Lisa of bunnyhood, basically. And so everybody reproduces it, usually badly. And so once you see if you ever see the real thing, then it's very difficult to look at somehow properly. But it is really quite amazing. And just the fact that so much loving care was taken over something as insignificant as this. Because when you zoom in on it, when every tiny detail is brought out in a wonderful way. And usually you see a hare should be a symbol of lust, of sort of carnal desire and things like that, but not here. It's just a bunny. It's just sort of sitting there. And again, you kind of hate to think that it has to be a dead bunny, I think, because you can't get a bunny to stay still for that long, because this is days and days and days and days of work, basically. So you've divorced it from religious symbolism. You're just doing it because you like it. And I had a nice experience with this. 1990, I think it was. I went on a River Danube cruise with a bunch of AGO people, and they were all just capitalists. Actually, it was when, well, again, you're too young to remember, when Bob Rae and the NDP came into power in Ontario, and they would go to turn the vote around and go the other way. There's no point going home with NDP running Ontario because they were all the big capitalists. Anyway, two of the biggest capitalists. See, the trouble with the Albertina, you've got the Kunsthistorisches Museum, You've got a pretty new palace called the Liechtenstein Palace. You've got modern art galleries. There's lots of, the Viennese school, secession school, people, Klimt and Schiller. There's so much stuff to look at in Vienna. But there's also this place called the Albertina, which has, it's mostly works on paper, kind of special. They don't always do that, but they should. And the trouble is that because of works on paper, they're so fragile and sensitive to light, like manuscripts and everything else, they don't often show the real thing. So when I was there with this group of ADO people, they had reproductions in all of a lot of the famous things like this, and they weren't even all that good reading. That's what got me mad, because you can make actual facsimiles and it's awfully hard to tell the difference. These almost look like they just ran it off in the photocopy machine somehow. So anyway, I was a bit upset, so I went to the desk and I pounded the desk and I said, I want to see the chief curator. And the thing was, the curator had actually just fairly recently written to me about some silly thing, and even more amazingly, I'd actually written back, so now I've got the big in. So the fella, actually it's a lady, comes out, and I say, hello, it's me from Canada, and she said, oh, lovely to see you. I said, can I come and see some real Dürers, because we're sick of looking at photocopies. And she said, well, no. I said, oh, come on, we come all the way from Canada. I've got two really rich collectors, and they would love to see these things. And she said, okay, well, go and get some lunch and come back. And and if the Albertina, if you know Vienna, which you don't, it's right near all the main foodie parts. So, Vienna is the best place to gain weight anyway. So we go away, we have lunch, we come back 5 pounds heavy. By this time, we've got the wives of both of the collectors. So there are now 5 of us, and I was afraid she was going to throw us out. But she had said before, she said, okay, I'm going to show you some woodcuts and engravings. I'll show you one of the superstar watercut, and that's it. My choice, no arguing. And so anyway, in we go, and on easels, she's got the best prints, the best examples of any of Dürer's woodcuts and engravings I've ever seen in my life. And we're sitting there, we've got magnifying glasses, we're looking at all this stuff. It's just quite extraordinary. Clearly, these are the best of the best of the best. And then she goes off, she comes back in, and she brings this, and she puts it on the stand, and now we're looking at the bunny, going, ooh. And so that's pretty good. And then because I'm so incredibly humorous, I say to her, could we possibly see the praying? And she said, no, you can't see the praying hands, because I said only one thing. And I said, no, I said, I want to see the praying feet. I thought that was funny. And because there are, in fact, praying feet. Oh, I didn't put it in here. So I've got to go to the other one just for my joke, my big joke. Because you need to see praying feet. And I found out, the joke sort of backfired, because I found out that the praying feet are actually in Rotterdam. Anyway, so she said, what are you talking about? Well, just while we're there, see, there's some birdie wings and things that he's done. That's pretty good, isn't it? Can you all do that? Would you want to? And other, there's a kingfisher or something. So here we are, we're looking at that. Now there's the feet. And that's the one I thought, that was my big funny joke. And what they are, they're studies for a drawing for an altarpiece that actually has been sort of destroyed. But these, in a lot of, and they're wonderful. Look at these lovely feet. And they're just as holy in some ways as the famous praying hands, which are those. If you haven't seen those, then I don't know what's the matter with you. Because again, they're far too famous. But these are very holy feet. And these are studies for the same altarpiece, again, that's sort of blown up somehow down the road. So anyway, she goes away. So I'll have a look, she said. So she goes away and she comes back. And she said, well, I couldn't find any praying feet, but because you behaved yourself, here are the praying hands. So now we've got the praying hand and the bunny side by side on these two things. And again, if you don't know this stuff, it's not that exciting. But if you, it was just an extraordinary experience. Because even if you look at this, everybody's seen the hands, and they're all made out of soap and all sorts of tacky reproductions. But when you see the real thing, it's like they're on lovely blue paper. And see, the thing is that they're far more finished than they really need to be just for the studies for a painting, because obviously they take on a life of their own, and all of the minuscule details of all the highlighting, this lovely sort of crook of the finger there, and the veins, you didn't actually have to do all of that. You just had to maybe sort of catch the basic pose of the hands. And again, look at the sort of engraver-like hatchings of the highlights there. So anyway, that was awfully special to have those two things side by each. I just found out a couple of days ago. This is again what's happened to the hands. The grave markers. I have no idea where this is, but somebody's gone to heaven, presumably thanks to Dura's big hands. Anyway, what I want to do now is we've done watercolor as much as we're going to, but check them out, Google them a little bit because they are awfully nice things. So now I want to get into printmaking, because this is the other area where, see, as a painter, everybody painted, so the paintings usually aren't as innovative. We'll be looking at some of them in a bit. But the woodcuts, the engravings, it's kind of his own stuff, so he can be much more free to be different than he would be in the sort of more conventional ways of illustrating things. So this is a woodcut. This is one of the most extraordinary, effective, I think, of all of the woodcuts. And he creates dozens. I mean, he's so prolific. You can't believe how many of these things he creates. And this is done in 1498. And this particular illustration, if that's the right word, is the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Very famous. And again, it's big, 15.5 by 11 inches. I mean, it's really quite grand in scale. And what happened was in 1498, there was a fellow called Anton Koberger, Koberger, who was the main publisher in Nuremberg, which remember where Dürer lived. And Koberger was actually Dürer's godfather, so it's kind of almost a family business basically. And they put out 2 editions in Latin and in German of the book of Revelation, Dürer's illustrations, the last book of the Bible, St. John. We've mentioned him quite a few times. And this is his vision sort of the end of the world and everything else. So there were 14 of these woodcuts. And again, what you have to take into account is, again, we're talking about end of the world stuff, the times, 1500, because we were looking at that with Bosch, and I mentioned that the sort of general paranoia that sweeps through Europe at this particular time, and Botticelli and Savonarola in Italy and things like that. The fear that God, who hadn't showed up in the year 1000, was going to come back in the time and a half in 1500. So everybody gets very sort of soul-searching, I guess, about how to survive to the next level, basically. Also, because when I read stuff to you, there's lots of references to plagues and famines. There were actually plagues and famines running around Europe at this particular time. And, well, there sort of always were, but they were particularly bad ones at this time. So everything was relevant. It was much, we just look at this sort of as a work of art. A little bit like the Isenheim altarpiece. Oh, it's a lovely painting. Well, not really lovely, but we don't see it as part of the therapeutic, curative process that it was supposed to be for all these poor, suffering humans. So anyway, this is an image which is relevant to its day, more than we might think nowadays. But the technique of woodcut itself, he just kind of, again, he doesn't invent it, he upgrades it, he perfects it in a way that nobody else could, basically. Now, this is actually by his teacher, Wolgemut, who I mentioned very quickly in passing last time, the local Nuremberg art, and it's a woodcut, but yeah, it's almost too far already. I mean, this is the creation of Eve, popping out from Adam's rib. He's not even remotely interested, is he? And it's not very, I mean, all these rather kind of sort of stubby little lines. Look at the hills and the trees. I mean, there's virtually nothing exciting going on back there. So this is the state of woodcut illustration, I guess, that would be, that he could have seen and learned from at that particular time. This is, I just found this is quite good, because this is, it's Samson killing the lion. And again, when you look at, if you look at the trees and the landscape, look into the background of Dürer's image, the extraordinary amount of extra detail that comes out there. But this is Samson, the Old Testament strong guy, jumping on the back of the lion, killing it, and again, the amount of detail is really quite wonderful. Even the sort of foliage and plants and things like that, just tremendous to look at. But this is the wood block. And I don't know if you've ever seen a wood block from that period. There used to be one in the gallery in Princeton. I was just dying it to grab it out of the case, ink it up, and roll off a few borders, because you could have. And the thing is, I mean, do you all do woodcuts here? Is that part of your What, did you do lino cuts in grade 4? Or potato cuts? Because, well, basically, I mean, you know, I'm much better than that. The process of of engraving is you get a piece of wood, and I can't honestly remember what kind of wood it is. It's like poplar, something very hard anyway. And you have a very sharp knife, like a little chisel, and you cut away what you don't want. So the lines that are going to stand up are flat to the top level of the block still. And then everything else you just chisel away. And you leave up little, very skinny lines standing up. And so what happens is, if I flip the block around, the other thing you have to do, because when you print it, it's going to come out the other way. So you've got to think in reverse, basically. Otherwise, your image will be all backwards. And so that's now reversing the block, and there it is there. And what happens is obviously, the point about these things is that they were pretty cheap. You could run them off. They're all very much related to the development of printing in general, printing books. Gutenberg in the 1450s, 60s or so. The mass production of knowledge, basically, in books that everybody could afford. And now illustrations, because in fact a lot of these images, there were 1 or 2 editions that actually had the words on the back of the print, so you could flip it over and read and look at the image. So it was tied in with the actual reading of the Bible as well as just looking at the stories. So again, it's a sort of thought process which is really very sophisticated. And the other thing, if you're just looking at quality, basically, is that as you start printing these things, it's sort of running through the press. It's quite a violent process in some ways. Eventually, a lot of these very, very fine, skinny, thin lines will start to break off. And the real experts can look at an image and sort of roughly gauge where it came on the process of creation. Because again, there's no limited edition at this time. What would happen again, because they're sort of for the mass market, his wife and his mother would go to fairs. I think I mentioned this briefly last time, and just set up a stall next to the guy selling shoes and fish and everything, and they would just sell the print, and when they ran out, they just run off some more. The other thing again to remember is that at this early stage, because again 1498, that's very early. I think Dürer had to be cutting the blocks himself. Because there's nobody else can do it, because he's basically inventing this sophisticated process, taking it, quantum leap beyond what anybody else was doing. So there wouldn't be any kind of apprentice or just a sort of craftsman that you could hire to do it. Plus, he's pretty young; he hasn't got much money to hire people anyway. So after he'd be painting away all day, the light of the day you paint. Then in the evenings you light the candles and you start slaving away at this sort of thing. So the idea of being a workaholic, I think that comes out in a lot of Dürer's work as well. But if we just look at that, again, what I want to do is just read from, just to show how an extraordinarily effective illustrator he is, to read you, in translation obviously, from the Bible, what he's actually talking about here. The one thing is there's references to colour here. I mean, you could colour, if you coloured a Dürer woodcut, you'd be immediately consigned to hell. I think you wouldn't do that. But there is colour in the description, which you can't do. But otherwise, what you have to listen to is the kind of rhythms of the language, and this is the old translation, not the new one, which sucks all the poetry out of it. The whole idea of sort of repetitions and rhythms and echoings of words sort of pick up in the image itself. So what we're talking about is St. John we saw him on the island of Patmos looking at him, his angel shows up and gives him all sorts of visions of things. This is the vision of the opening of the 7 seals, very famous. And this is St. John's, right? This is, if you want to look it up, Revelations chapter 6, verses 1 to 8. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder, and one of the 4 beasts saying, "Come and see." And I saw and beheld a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and the crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. And when he'd opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd beast say, "Come and see." And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. And when he'd opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd beast say, "Come and see." And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And if you can just see at the back of the image, there's the third figure here is the scales are sort of flying out behind. And we've seen before that anytime you see scales, you think of the weighing of souls, Last Judgment, that sort of thing. So that's the third figure. And then the final one down at the bottom right. And when he'd opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death. And again, we're all so sophisticated here, we just read that and it's kind of entertaining. And again, you imagine yourself back in 1498 being scared of all the boogeymen and the threat of perpetual punishment and things. That's pretty effective, I think. And one of the nice, again, it's sort of just the way the design, because the four horses, or the three horses at least, are like a great sort of combine harvester, sort of ploughing along, and this great sort of scything up of all the unfortunate characters down here. But remember with Bosch, we saw a lot, in particular, we saw a lot of anti-clericalism, the love of God but the hate of the church, basically. And look who's been, because here's Death on the pale horse, the skinny animal. We saw something similar in Bruegel. And there's the hell mouth, and look who's getting sucked into the hell mouth like this great vacuum cleaner, is the bishop. So again, the idea of hating the corruption of the church, so kind of a little bit of a revenge going on there. And the common people would have loved that, I think, to see, he got his just desserts, basically. And see, another thing is she's got a money bag in her belt, all the kind of material possessions that don't do you a whole lot of good on Judgment Day. So that's pretty good stuff. Now, again, just showing you one. You could rush home and look at all the other 13 if you like. They're really rather good. And again, I can't think of any other artists, because other artists have had a go at the apocalypse of illustrating them. But none of them have ever done it as successfully as Dura. And he can go from scary to cute. That's, again, the good thing of lots of artists. There's just the variety of approaches is quite wonderful. This is called the Holy Family with three hairs, because, I mean, we just saw the hair, sort of like little Beatrix Potter bunnies down at the bottom here. Again, so they're just sweet. So the whole thing becomes almost sort of Sunday school rather than high mass. We saw that with some Flemish painters much earlier on. And again, woodcuts, so this extraordinary technique of the detailing of the landscapes. It's sort of a combination of the Holy Family plus a little bit of crowning going on. Lovely birds, again, you have to think of the block, those tiny little lines standing up, taking the ink, which on the smooth surface, and then getting run through the press. And we'll see when we get into engravings how much the detail can be expanded enormously. Sitting in a kind of enclosed garden, we saw the symbolism of that, but another thing, he's not beating you over the head with symbolism. And again, the idea is that these are for the common folk who might not get the point, so you don't want to get too complicated. But lots of lovely lilies and all the other flowers that we saw being symbolic of Mary. And this is, again, the idea of a landscape, which is, again, try and find a good reproduction of this, and again, stare at it and or just zoom in on it like this, because you cannot believe how much stuff is going on. And this is the flight into Egypt, so here's the Holy... It's nice because they're riding on the donkey, but they've taken the ox along as well, so that's kind of, remember in the stable. And old Joseph, it's a lovely way that he's plodding along here, looking back to make sure things are okay. And then Mary she's got a rather nice hat. And there's a little elk, there's a little bunny right there. And there's all sorts of stuff that you see the 23rd time you look at it. There's a wonderful little crowd of a shower of cherubim and seraphim, a number of little holy ones who didn't even have bodies, just wings and heads. One of them seems to be he's either throwing up or he's falling out of heaven, I'm not sure, but he's not having a good day there. And these are the date trees. Remember the legends of other flight into Egypt, that when they were hungry, usually old Joseph's whacking away at the tree with a stick, and then the little baby Jesus just sort of commands the tree to bend down with all of its fruit so that they can get physical sustenance. So again, it's partly visual, and it's partly just sort of a nice image anyway. And this is sort of the companion to that. I'm not sure how much I can zoom in on it. is the rest on the flight into Egypt. So here they've arrived somewhere, not sure. These are the scenes we've seen over and over again, so popular. And these are both 1504, the two woodcuts. And which means that they're just about exactly 500 years old. So, and you sort of think, what are the odds that they're going to survive? Because people, again, the people who bought them weren't the connoisseurs. These aren't like manuscripts that the Duke of Berry and his best friend and Bishop of Chartres can sort of kind of pore over and enjoy just in their palatial home. These are, just to be thumbtacked to the wall or whatever. So the chances of them coming through all of that in really good condition are pretty slim, which is why the supremely good ones are worth a huge pile of money nowadays, just the rarity factor. But this is rather nice as well, because here's old Joseph. You remember he's the carpenter, he's working away here. There's a wonderful little gang of angels have shown up. They're not being very helpful, they're just sort of mucking around here. They've got little thing, the wind will come along and blow them around. And poor little Christ child's in there. They used to sort of bind babies' limbs so they couldn't move. So something that might be a good idea. And it's in a little rocking cradle there, and Mary's actually doing a bit of spinning. So they're both sort of doing sex-appropriate jobs, I guess you could say. But this wonderful, all the buildings, the ruins and things like that, God the Father hanging around out there. And again, when you think of the technical business of just carving away the lines, really is, and leaving what you want standing up, really is quite extraordinary. And I love this one as well, because this is maybe the study that he did for, it's sort of a combo, in a way, the study for a woodcut. Or maybe, I think maybe more for an engraving, because it's just so complex. So it's basically pen and ink plus watercolour. And so, if you did totally colour an engraving, it might look something like this, but you don't have to. I gave a series of lectures a while ago about this general symbolism around, and I started with this, and I basically almost spent the first lecture talking about nothing else, because there was just so much stuff going on. So just abbreviating things a bit, but again, it's the sort of rest on the flight into Egypt, kind of. And it's a little bit of a conflation of various scenes. And this Joseph, again, doddering along. Remember last year he was 18. And all the birds, the flowers, they're all symbolic of something, in this case sort of evil that is overcome by Christ. A nice parrot. There's one of them bugs that we just saw earlier. So he can use the studies that'll come up nicely. It's about to bite the dog on the nose, I think. And a sort of shifty-looking fox. I don't know what that means. But in the background, there's all this stuff, because we've seen lots of times the adoration to the shepherds. That's what's going on there with the angel telling them they better get over, visit this little baby. And I'd love a little detail like this. Goat that's going at the dog. There's going to be tears before bedtime there. I think that's quite good. But there's another goat. He's standing up on its hind legs, and that was that there was a legend that when Noah and the ark, remember him, when he hits dry land, he actually sees a goat standing up on its hind leg, eating grapes off a tree, and they kind of fermented, and the goat eats the grapes and then goes sort of staggering off, and Noah thinks, oh, well, that looks kind of good. So he gets the grapes and makes wine and gets drunk himself. So again, that's a little sort of reference to a story like that. There are also, again, when you think of the scale of the thing, there are camels coming up. This has to be the three magi, the three kings who are showing up. There's a little procession there with banners. This lovely little village with boats in the harbour. So the camels there, one lot there, a third one coming along there. So that would be the three kings. So it's nice, and it would be good to have a little bit of washy colours thrown in. But basically, there's so much information in the images, and you don't really need colour. I mean, colour is sort of implied, but doesn't have to be specified. That one, by the way, it's called, in case you care, The Virgin with a Multitude of Animals. 1503, and it's yet another one that's in the Albertina. We didn't get to look at this one. So, now on to engravings. And what happens with engravings is, I've showed you a couple already with nemesis and things like that, but with engravings, the technique itself is that much more sophisticated and difficult, I would have thought. But also you can include an extraordinarily extra amount of detail, and that allows you, I think, to put more content into the images as well, because you tend to see the I think the point was that the engravings, because they've been much more expensive, were aimed at a more sophisticated audience than the woodcuts, which were sort of for everybody. So you see more symbolism, you see more a sort of love of tiny detail. Even something like, look, there's that house in the woods, or the house on the pond, the watercolour sort of relates to that earlier on. And this one is called The Virgin Child with a Monkey. What else would you call it? And monkey, well, this is, I'll give you the 1498 or so. And monkeys, we've met monkeys occasionally, they are really symbols of our animal instincts, maybe. Anything that we do that's stupid, sort of relates us to the animal kingdom. But he's kind of a cute monkey, so he doesn't look that evil. Plus he's chained up, that's always good for controlling bad behaviour, basically. So it's more about the fall of the drapery and just this lovely little Christ. And again, the increased amount of information that's provided in the background. So engraving, again, as you all know much better than I do, is you take a usual copper plate, metal plate, whatever, and then you dig into it with this pointy tool called a burin, and you should create the furrows. And so it's now the opposite process of basically you're sort of drawing the line essentially, rather than cutting away what you don't want and leaving everything else standing. So now it's a more sort of positive process in the sense of actually sort of drawing the line that you want. So it allows, I think, we'll see almost better examples in a minute, an unbelievable amount of detail. Again, you have to get your magnifying glass and zoom in on these things to see how amazing they are. And again, the idea of the lines breaking off in woodcuts. They wouldn't do that here, but they might get a bit clogged up. Because what you do here is you put slightly dampened paper into the press, and the force of the press pushes the slightly dampened paper into the grooves that have got the ink. And they pick up the ink off that. So again, it's a very subtle process. If you press too hard, it gets sort of blurry. But one thing you do get, and again, this is a very connoisseur-y thing, is that as you're ploughing along with your burin, it is actually like a sort of ploughed field. You throw up a little kind of furrow thing, a little raised edge beside the line that you've cut in. And that creates, when you print it, that creates a rather soft, sort of blurry quality. It's called the burr, B-U-R-R. And after a while, after you've run the plate through the press a few times, that line is going to get just flattened off, basically. So the connoisseur is looking for the slight blurry edge at the side of the line, and again, you need a microscope almost to see that. But it shows the sophistication of people who want to look at these things. And as I say, content can get more subtle. And again, I mean, this is pretty good. This is actually Schongauer, the fellow who he went to study with. I mentioned him last time, that was dead before he got there. And he was a pretty successful artist. And this is, we saw the theme last week of St. Jerome in the wilderness being tempted by all these pretty decent demons. But again, it's nothing as cleverly, wonderfully detailed as sort of Dürer is able to do. And this is, again, just another example to show you how lovely these things are. Another little sort of rest on the flying Luigi, I guess, himself. I love old Joseph there, just absolutely flaked out, having a little snooze. He's just so happy. And this one is called the Madame Child with the Dragonfly, I think, because there's a little dragonfly down there. About 1495. And again, you just enjoy it. All the detail of the landscape. Expressions are pretty nice, and then God hanging around out there. But the bits and the pieces here, they're just so well done. And now, so this is the early superstar engraving. I just want to show you. And I mean, what's happening here is it's complexity of technique, and also much more complex subject matter. The sort of thing that the average peasant in the street wouldn't get. So there's no point in trying to sell this in the fish market, basically. So you're aiming for an upmarket clientele, basically. And it's just Adam and Eve. We've met them 100 times. Often just called the fall of man, because that's what's going on. It's the sort of moment of the temptation with the serpent issuing apples. And not sure how you get your hair to stay out like that. But anyway, that's okay. And again, what you have to do is sort of you zoom in on all of the technical brilliance of the different textures, the bark of the tree, and the density of the forest and things like that. There's his, remember the signature, he had one AD just down in the corner by Albertus Dura, and I'm not sure if Noricus means either the northerner or from Nuremberg. I've forgotten, but Fakier is made this. 1504, the date. And so what we see here again is the sort of, well, actually, if you have to have these sort of almost side by side, but the slightly earlier engravings, the lines are quite long, and what happens is that in this by 1504, it's almost a kind of stipple technique, very short little scratchy lines to suggest the form, and that gives a softness to the image which the earlier ones didn't have. So this is, again, as with the watercolors, very quickly he's sort of figuring out what engraving can do, can be, can look like. But I think, again, a little bit like the Nemesis, that kind of double standard in a sense, is you might see this as an illustration, a reflection of Dura's own artistic position somehow, because the background is all this wonderful depth, dense, impenetrable forest. You can't get in, obviously, because it's just all being blocked off. So in a sense, that again is kind of Dura's inherited northernness. And I've talked about this a little bit before. In Italy you had the antiquity, you had the Renaissance. All of those are sort of civilizing aspects. They kind of control you. There's a reasonableness to life. And there's all these kind of textbook ways of doing things the right way. In the north, they didn't really have that. It was much more sort of free-flowing. Plus, some areas were overtaken by the Romans, but mostly they kind of were freed from that. So there was a kind of barbarian roughness to their character. And so all the idea of sort of things that, superstitions and, well, somebody called it the knowledge of fearful places. That's rather good. Things that go bump in the night. That sort of thing. So that's kind of the background, which again is sort of blocked up. And the figures of Adam and Eve, and it should be paradise, but it kind of isn't. Adam and Eve, they kind of stand out almost in relief in front of that, as if they're not quite part of this particular world. And they are certainly inspired, at least, by antique ideals of physical perfection, basically. And you look at Adam, and I think it might work if I flip that around, it sort of looks wrong, doesn't it? And again, when you think of actually creating the image in reverse, and there would be drawings that you figure out with that before you start the actual process. But if you look at Adam, and as I say, I'm not really sure quite which way it works, because it sort of hovers in between. He definitely derives to a certain extent from this fellow, the great Apollo Belvedere, who actually... Well, he was only just discovered by the fellow, he was still a cardinal, but he's going to be Julius II. Have we met him before? Again, I'm giving too many lectures, too many places. But this becomes the quintessential, ideal, antique figure of aristocratic view. This is Apollo who's sort of on the job. He's shooting arrows at all the forces of darkness and superstition. He is enlightenment, he's knowledge, everything personified in this one beautiful figure. But again, the perfect proportions, all of that. And he's in contrapposto, which is the balance. You've got your weight on one leg raised, one relaxed, one arm relaxed as well. Beautiful profile, all of that kind of classical perfection. And this sort of really, sort of is, but he sort of totters a bit. I mean, he's got the weight a little bit too far on one leg, so that in a way gives him a little bit of a, just to show him the right way, a little bit of kind of awkwardness, because he's sort of human and he can't quite decide whether or not to grab the apple or not. So a little bit of dithering perhaps going on within the body, which wouldn't certainly be there because he's just perfect in every single way. And Eve sort of derives from antique ideals of femininity, and usually it was Venus or Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and love and everything else. But even, again, the perfection of proportions, going back at least to the 4th century BC. And again, a little bit, sort of like those studies and drawings I showed earlier, a little bit not quite conforming perhaps to the ideal classical feminine beauty. But it just, so I mean, to me again, it's a slightly kind of disconnect, if you like, between the two worlds of the north and the south. And he's having a go, but as we'll see, particularly when we get into the paintings, I really don't think he's that successful. The more he tries to be an Italian or a classicist, I'm not sure if he's quite so good. Anyway, that's what he's doing. But also what we're seeing, because this is now for the rich folk who've got education and knowledge, there's a ton of stuff going on here. And we saw, for example, very quickly, I showed Cranach last time, all hundreds of animals all thrown in. You don't know quite if he knows what they mean or not, or if he just wants to have a big zoo going on. But in this case, it's very particular, and I did sort of read off about the four humours a while ago, all the four humours of the blood, which was the basis of all medicine and theology, really sort of all intermingled at the time. And so what we have here, you can see the beasts, the top one, the cat here, which is looking very closely at this soon-to-be lunch mouse. And that is, again, don't worry about all the details, that's choleric cruelty. We'll have more on the humours later on. The rabbit, see there's another nice sort of bunny hair over there, but in this context that represents sanguine sensuality, also associated with lechery and blood diseases. There's an elk, that's an elk, believe it or not. That is melancholy, associated with avarice and the disease of black gall, G-A-L-L. And the ox, snoozing away over there, that is phlegmatic sluggishness, and it's associated with gluttony and sloth. So again, if you know the code, if you like, there's a ton of stuff going on here. Even way up here, I love this little guy, it's a goat, teetering on the brink, and that apparently represents kind of pagan religions, the infidel basically, about to, a little bit like in Bosch and people, there's no solid foundation of that, it's going to just go crashing off the edge of it. It's a lovely little bit of imagery. And again, all the detail in here, just amazingly well done. Somebody, I just read fairly recently, somebody worked out that Dura is actually holding, that's mountain ash, which is a northern tree, and that sort of represents the tree of life with a nice parrot on it. And Eve, this amazingly well-placed shrubbery that you see here. That is a fig branch. I guess that's the origin of fig, Adam and Eve having fig leaves, which they don't usually get until quite a lot later. But the fig leaf, that's sort of from the tree of knowledge, and that's a southern tree. So basically you've got sort of two sort of mix of northern and southern elements just in the little bits there themselves, as well perhaps as in the overall background, and then the figures. Sort of, it's almost as if they've been glued onto the front of them somehow. So that's actually a good place to start, because what I want to get into now, I don't want to hit quite yet. Just while he's there, because I don't know where else I'm going to put him. And that is a drawing, I can't even remember where it comes from, but it was on loan to the AGO for a bit with an exhibition of Renaissance drawing, and you've never seen anything as beautiful as this. And I don't know if it's a study for anything. It might just be a standalone drawing, but you just gazed at it for ages. I mean, just technically, again, that sort of hatching of an engraver, perhaps. 1521, that's pretty late.
So is that a drawing? Or is
it's a drawing. It's a drawing with highlighted with white. And the beard was
watercolor? Is that?
Well, just drawing with wash and or just chalk. No, I don't think there's any watercolor on it. Well, there might be little bits of wash around here, yeah. Basically just pen and ink. But I don't know, do you guys learn to draw this well anymore? I don't think so. It's sort of a lost art, isn't it? Just you don't have to, you can just throw paint and get away with it. It's much easier that way. Do you all draw?
Yeah.
I told you about giving a lecture at this place called the School of the Academy of Realist Art, which everything is about drawing, which was until the 19th century, that was the basis of all that. Everybody learned how to draw before they could do anything else. But it didn't mean to say you were going to do something as good as this, because that goes beyond just academic sort of. The trouble with academic discipline is that everybody ends up exactly the same, and all, if you go to the 90s, all sort of genius and imagination is sort of sucked out, and mediocrity prevails. in the worst case. I mean, there are some really good ones, but basically everybody could paint, everybody could draw. But I think this is just absolutely lovely. So, anyway, come back just after 4 o'clock, and I'll start showing you some paintings, which, I mean, not to be too picky, they're not my favourites, I might be a little bit rude about them, but that's okay. So if you haven't had it in your essays, there's a smallish pile here, I need more. And if you haven't read my courses, I did say if you haven't got it here,